Welcome back to Witch Hunt Podcast. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our special double feature with Professor Richard Raiswell.
That's right. This is part 2 of our conversation with Professor Raiswell from the University of Prince Edward Island, continuing our exploration of the critical relationship between demonology and witch persecution.
In part 1, we began examining how beliefs about demons became intrinsically linked with witchcraft accusations in the 15th century.
Professor Raiswell, who many of you will remember from our Speak of the Devil episode, brings his expertise in medieval devil lore to help us understand this pivotal historical development.
Now, in part 2, we'll begin our exploration into the history of the Malleus Maleficarum.
We'll explore how many of the tropes about witch hunting either developed in the Malleus or were reiterated by the Malleus.
If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, we recommend starting there, although this episode can certainly stand on its own.
Both episodes are available now wherever you get your podcasts.
So let's rejoin our conversation with Professor Raiswell as we continue our examination of the demonic and witchcraft beliefs that led to the Malleus Maleficarum. How does the Malleus Maleficarum fit in?
While the Errores Gazariorum had said that witches could be male and female, witchcraft becomes increasingly more gendered. And you see that right from the start on the title page of the Malleus Maleficarum, because Maleficarum is a feminine noun in Latin. It would be Maleficorum if it was masculine. And the way gendered languages work, if you've got 500 women and one man, you always use the masculine form. So this text is the hammer of evil-doing women, or the hammer of witches. The Malleus is a very bad book. I don't just mean that it's morally repugnant. It's actually very poorly written. And some of the theological arguments that they make are really not very clever. And this is made worse by the fact that what most people use in the Anglophone world when they're looking at the Malleus is the translation which was done in 1928 by a guy called Montague Summers. This is the translation that you can find available on the internet or through sort of fairly lavish editions on Amazon or whatever. Leaving aside the fact that the translation doesn't read very well at all, Summers translated the Malleus because he believed the kinds of witchcraft the Malleus described were still real in 1928. In the preface to his edition of the Malleus, he says, "Witchcraft is an evil thing, an enemy to light and allied to the powers of darkness, of disruption and decay. It is a vast political movement, an organized society which was antisocial and anarchical, a worldwide plot against civilization." He says the text does have some problems, but he says that they are trifling blemishes, his language, but the essential message remains relevant today with its Bolsheviks and anarchists, as it was in 1486 when it appeared. Some of the misogyny, he says, is a touch extreme, but he continues, and again, this is his language, it is a wholesome and needful antidote to the current feministic age with its confounding of the sexes. Obviously, anybody who approaches a translation of a document like with those sorts of biases is going to produce a very stilted translation. We have a very good English language translation, which was done by a colleague at the University of Alberta, Christopher McKay, came out in 2009. It is absolutely first rate. But one of the things McKay makes clear in his translation is that the authors of the Malleus were writing very, very fast, and they were really, really sloppy. They are lifting stuff from other sources, which is absolutely fine for the period. I mean, nowadays you say plagiarism, it's not on. I can't do that in my work, but it's absolutely fine by 15th century standards. But they're lifting stuff from manuals about prosecuting heretics, which are all written in the masculine. And frequently, they are just so sloppy, they don't even bother to turn the nouns feminine. So when you read Summers's translation, he turns everything feminine, which sort of makes the Malleus look even worse than it is. I mean, it's an incredibly bad book, but it's incredibly sloppy too. And frequently, nouns in the Malleus are masculine when you'd expect feminine, given the perspective of the authors. To understand the book, I think it's very important to understand the circumstances in which it's written. When it was printed, it was attributed to a theologian from the University of Cologne in northwest Germany named Jacobus Sprenger and another unnamed collaborator. Inside the text, it's clear that the other collaborator is a guy called Heinricus Institoris, or Heinrich Kramer in German. Modern scholars argue that the work is largely the work of Institoris, and some have gone so far as to suggest that Sprenger actually had nothing to do. I think that's going too far. As McKay points out in his translation, one of the things the authors of the Malleus did is they submitted it to the theology faculty at the University of Cologne. Said, what do you think of this book? Sprenger is on the faculty, the theology faculty at the University of Cologne. If Institoris had actually just attributed it to somebody who had nothing to do with the book, he would have noticed. So Sprenger certainly had something to do with the text, but what he had to do with, we don't know. It's quite likely that Institoris wrote nearly all of it. Sprenger is an academic. His only other work is a book about praying the rosary. That's it. So he's involved in a book about the prosecution of witches, and he's got another one about praying the rosary. He probably doesn't have that much to do with it. Maybe he's involved in a bit of the theology. Institoris is quite a different man. He's a theologian. He's a university doctor, so he's got the equivalent of a PhD in theology. But he's fundamentally a practical man. He's interested in preaching. He's concerned with rooting out heresy. And we know that he's engaged as an inquisitor, rooting out heresy in parts of the German lands as early as 1467. We've got a letter from the late 1470s where the Pope describes him as a man notable for his zeal for religion, his knowledge of letters, so he's well read, his integrity of life, his constancy of faith, along with various other praiseworthy virtues and merits. Yeah, it's not really the whole story. He seems to have been widely disliked. He faced punishment a couple of times himself. 1484, he gets into trouble for slandering the Holy Roman Emperor. Don't do that. It's just generally not a good idea. And in 1482, he seems to have been accused of embezzling money or collected to fund a crusade against the Ottoman Turks. Nevertheless, in 1474, he becomes appointed as an inquisitor for the southern regions of modern-day Germany, plus Switzerland and Western Austria. So that eastern side of that area where witchcraft accusations are beginning. And it's in that capacity that he shows up in Ravensburg in 1484. What's happened? So Ravensburg is in southwest Germany. It's a lovely little town in southwest Germany. It's about 2 hours from Munich. A couple of months earlier, there'd been a severe freak hailstorm that had hit the town. The hailstorm had destroyed the crops in the field and had ruined the city's vineyards. According to the accounts, it was going to take a good 2 years for the town to recover agriculturally. So this is a devastating event. But this was just the latest round of bad luck that had hit the city. There'd been freak weather events for the past couple of summers, torrential rains, there'd even been an outbreak of plague. But in the summer of 1484, people are beginning to think something is up. Many people begin to state publicly that they think that this disaster must be a result of some sort of harmful spells. And so there's a public clamor in the marketplace about this. People are talking. What's going on? Why have we been hit by such bad luck? In response to this public outcry, the chaplain of the big local church, a man called Johannes Gremper, called for the matter to be investigated by the Inquisition. And he requested, it seems to be specifically, that Institoris be invited to the city to investigate. What we haven't appreciated before is that Institoris had actually been to the city 10 years earlier. Back in 1475, he'd been sent there by the Bishop of Trent. Trent is in northern Italy. The Bishop of Trent was being investigated by the Pope. Bishop of Trent had just executed 13 Jews after the discovery of the body of a 2-year-old Christian boy named Simon. This is a classic example of what's called the blood libel. The idea that Jews kill Christian children to use their blood, to use their bodies in demonic rituals. The Bishop of Trent had executed various Jews after the propagation of a blood libel in his city. All of this, of course, is anti-Semitic garbage. Never happens. But these accusations led to many in the Jewish community in Trent being killed. In response to these executions in Trent, various members of the Jewish community in other towns petitioned the Pope and various other high-ranking church officials to investigate what had happened. They say that the bishop went after the Jews in Trent in order to get his hands on their money. To defend himself against this accusation, the Bishop of Trent seems to have enlisted Institoris. He said to Institoris, go to Ravensburg, because back in 1428, they did the same thing. There was a blood libel in Ravensburg in 1428. Again, a Christian boy was found in Ravensburg. He was found hanging from a tree. The local Jewish community was blamed for it. A whole pile of people were executed. So Institoris is sent by the Bishop of Trent to go to Ravensburg. He goes to Ravensburg. He meets various people who were involved in executing all of these Jews in Ravensburg, and they attest everything we did was legal, it was above board, nobody got their hands on the money of these Jews, it was because they were guilty. So Institoris collects all of this and gives it to the Bishop of Trent in his defense in Trent. So the point is that when Gremper calls Institoris to investigate in 1484, he's a known commodity in the city. They know what they're getting. It's just not some random guy they've called in who happens to be some sort of zealot. This is somebody they know already.
So what happens when Institoris comes to Ravensburg?
So he comes to Ravensburg and he seems to spend several days preaching in the city's main church about the evils of sorcery and about witchcraft. So what he's doing is he's priming the people. They start thinking in these terms. And then he invites anybody with knowledge or suspicion or who has heard rumors about people using unnatural means to harm other people or their animals. He wants them to come forward and to make a legal deposition against them. And according to the accounts, a great number of people gave depositions. We don't know how many. It just says a great number of people. On the basis of this, at least 3 women, maybe as many as 6, and the reasons for that I'll make clear in a minute, are arrested and taken into custody. And of these, he starts interrogations with the 2 women who are arrested who are of lowest status. They're described as Agnes, the bathkeeper, and Anna of Mindelheim. In the presence of Gremper, the mayor and other members of the town council, the 2 of them are subjected to what the source says is the lightest torture, and both of them confessed quickly. They confessed to having intercourse with incubi, so male demons, Agnes says that she'd been doing this regularly for 18 years. Anna said she'd been doing it for 20 years. Agnes also admitted to having caused the hailstorm that had hit the city. She said that she'd been summoned by her demon to come outside the town and to bring with her a bowl of water. The demon told her to dig a hole to pour the water in and then to stir the water with her finger, invoking the name of the demon himself. The water promptly disappeared into the air, and then an hour later, this great storm began. Agnes also admitted to using witchcraft to harm various people in the town, burying the bones of animals under the threshold of their house. When Anna was interrogated, she admitted much the same thing. On the third day after their arrest, they're handed over to the town's secular authorities and they're burned. Churchmen don't execute. They hand people over to the secular authorities. Churchmen technically can't shed blood, so they just pass sentence and they hand them over to the secular authorities for carrying out sentence. Before she dies, Agnes made a full confession of all of her crimes, and she died in the flames, embracing the cross. Anna would not confess, and she died slandering and cursing the town's Christian folk. And after that, Instatoris leaves. Now, remember I said that there were at least 3, maybe as many 6 women that were arrested as a result of this. The other, or others, are still in jail when Instatoris leaves. One of them is the wife of the local locksmith, and she's released days after Instatoris leaves. What she does is she swears out what's called an offeder. This is a formal legal document which requires the accused to be released on condition that they do not sue anybody who has sworn out accusations against them. And she's also required, in swearing out this offeder, to produce a certain number of guarantors who are prepared to pledge to her good behavior. And they're liable if she does try to take revenge on those people who had accused her. So this document is sworn out just days after Instatoris has left. And given that this locksmith's wife is required to provide guarantors with reputation to stand up for her, this suggests that while some people have accused her of witchcraft, she was actually fairly well connected socially. She was charged, so she's maybe a bit dubious, but she's got enough connections because they're all male connections. She's got enough male people of status to swear that she is a decent woman in the end. By contrast, this must mean that Agnes and Anna, who were executed, didn't have those sorts of guarantors. Instatoris says in the Malleus that when you begin witchcraft prosecutions, you always begin with the easiest cases because they're likely to confess and that'll implicate other people. So the case against the locksmith is not one Instatoris touched. He expected the local church authorities to go after her, but they don't. We've got offeder relating to witchcraft-related offenses from 1486, 1489, and 1490. What we don't know is whether these women were women who were caught up in the Inquisition that Instatoris started up in 1484. Jail in the Middle Ages is not a punishment. It's a place where you're held until you're punished. Punishment is physical. It's either corporeal or it's execution at some level. So the one who swears out an offeder in 1490, she would, if this was related to Instatoris's Inquisition, she would have been in jail for 6 years. That's really unusual. So we just don't know what happened with these 3 other women. It's either that they were caught up in Instatoris's Inquisition, or there's more stuff happening which we don't know, which is absolutely possible. So what this shows is that people's position in society matters. Some people are insulated if they've got connections into society, particularly male society, obviously.
And what happens when Instaurus goes to Innsbruck?
So he's in Ravensburg in 1484. He shows up in Innsbruck in July 1485. And we frankly don't know why he ends up there. There's not a big hailstorm in Innsbruck or anything like that. But he shows up in Innsbruck in late July 1485, and he again begins by preaching. He preaches apparently for 15 days straight. I mean, not all the time, but he preaches for 15 days about the evils of witchcraft. So again, he's priming the pump. People are predisposed to thinking in these terms. And then, as he did in Ravensburg, he invites people with knowledge or suspicion of witchcraft to make depositions in front of him. And these depositions absolutely have to be secret. The secrecy is absolutely vital for him. And this process apparently takes 6 weeks. 64 people show up and make depositions, and they accuse a total of 46 different women. Now, an outsider coming to town and initiating legal proceedings against a large number of people requires the support of the local community. I mean, Instaurus doesn't have any troops with him. He needs the consent of the local community. The local bishop is meant to help him, and initially the local bishop does. But as the investigations get going, the bishop has problems with the way Instaurus is handling things. The bishop wants Instaurus to let the accused know who had sworn out depositions against them. That's absolutely standard in the legal system that they are using. But Instaurus doesn't want these names public because witchcraft is a secret crime. If you think about it, if you're accused of murder, the murdering stops when you're in jail, right? You're not going to murder anybody in jail, so we can know who accused you of murder. But witchcraft doesn't work that way. You could be sitting in jail and you could be taking revenge on the people who fitted you up. So the danger doesn't stop just because these people are in jail. So Instaurus insists that the names of the people who have accused these women be secret. So there's a tension here between the bishop, who's insisting upon normal legal procedure, and Instaurus, who's trying to do something different already. From all of these depositions, Instaurus decides to move forward with 6 cases, get convictions on these first 6, as he'd done in Ravensburg, and then he can go off and leave the local bishop to deal with all the others. What happens here is really strange, because what happens is the bishop hires the best lawyer around to work to defend the women accused of witchcraft. And the lawyer does what lawyers do. He immediately begins by saying, "You're not following proper legal procedure." And he tries to have Instaurus replaced as an inquisitor. "You're not up to the job. You're making this up as you go along. This isn't proper." So he tries to have him replaced as inquisitor. He even tries at one point to get him arrested. That doesn't work. But eventually what the lawyer does is ends up appealing the case to Rome. Says, "Instaurus, you're just not handling it right. We're going to appeal this all the way over your head to the Pope proper." Instaurus says, "Fine, that's your right, but meanwhile, we're going to get things going here." And as soon as he tries to get the trial going, it just breaks down in chaos. It just completely collapses. And the women who had been arrested were all released. They were released in November 1485. Now, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we just don't know about. But there seems to be a good amount of local opposition to Instaurus. If you go around and you're accusing 46 women, that's a lot of male relatives, a lot of friends who you've suddenly made very, very angry. And it's clear that the bishop is playing to some of this opposition somehow. We don't know very much about it. Instaurus, though, doesn't leave. He's still in town as late as the 9th of February 1486. Because the bishop writes to him on the 9th of February 1486, he said, I can't guarantee your safety here anymore. If you're smart, you'll leave. And he seems to have done that. In fact, in that letter, it's quite amusing. He calls Incitatus effectively senile, even though Incitatus would have been only about 55. Incitatus leaves Innsbruck in February 1486. The Malleus is printed, or at least is ready to be printed, by December 1486. This is the context. So he is really, really angry. He's writing this text because he's been humiliated. And he's absolutely convinced that what he's discovered is a vast demonic conspiracy. And the local bishop, of all people, are in league with these people. So this is an angry book. And most of it seems to be written very fast in this sort of fallout period from when the prosecution collapses in November to the book appearing towards the end of December in the very next year, the end of December 1486. So it's written in a fit of pique, as it were, quickly and sloppily, and according to what sources he has to hand. The point I'm going to make about the Malleus is that it's a very defensive book. Some of the things that they try to make you think that this book is better than it is. They try to make you think that it's approved by the Pope, and it absolutely isn't. In fact, the theology faculty of Cologne, even though one of the authors is there, said, yeah, it's all right. The theologians sign on and say, yeah, I agree with what the dean says. They're not ringing endorsements by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that the importance of the book is when it shows up. And it shows up right at the beginning of printing. So it spreads widely. And the last part of the book, the theology, as I'll argue, is pretty thin. But the last part, third part, is a do-it-yourself guide to running an inquisition. It's even got what we would call forms to fill in, sample forms. If you want to do a deposition, this is how it looks. Copy this out. And I think that even 100 years later, when the book is still being printed, I don't think they're reading the theology. I think they're using it because it's handy as a legal guide.
Thank you for enjoying this week's Double Devil episodes.
Next week, you'll be treated to another Raiswell double feature.
And next week's double feature is jam-packed with more history of the Malleus Maleficarum.
The Witch's Hammer.
Hexenhammer.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow. The Salem witch trials resulted in witchcraft accusations against more than 150 people and the executions of 20. So what went wrong? We explore this and other facets of the witch hunt in our new podcast, The Thing About Salem, premiering June 1st.
The Thing About Salem offers bite-sized episodes in both video and audio formats that you can enjoy in 15 minutes or less.
I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. Our ancestors experienced the Salem witch trials.
And here's a little taste of what you can expect from The Thing About Salem. Possibly Dr. William Griggs decides that the girls, they're not sick in a natural way. They're under an evil hand. Just like that one, Sarah. So what does it mean that they're under an evil hand?
The devil has come to Salem.
The devil's in Salem.
Each week, The Thing About Salem brings you information on a thing from the witch trials.
Episodes will stream on YouTube and all podcast platforms. To get ready, find us at aboutsalem.com.
Be sure to join us for episode 1 on June 1st.